This is the story of September 11th, 2001. The story starts with Al-Qaeda in 1979. This is when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. The genesis of the group starts here. After the Soviet invasion, a man named Osama bin Laden traveled to Afghanistan to help organize the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen was a group of Arabs that were used to resist the communist invaders. But after the Soviet Union exited the country in 1989, bin Laden and these Islamic scholars formed a group, MAK, in 1984. MAK was an organization to support Arab Mujahideen who came to join the jihad fight in Afghanistan. It is important to note that during the Soviet-Afghan War, the CIA funded several $billions of worth of weapons to Afghan Mujahideen. As a result, some of the portions of these weapons would end up coming to the Arab volunteers. It is important to know that the next statement I say, there are conflicting reports that come with it, but it says that the United States of America never aided bin Laden or any of his affiliates during the war. In 1996, bin Laden issued his first fatwa. It declared war against the United States and called for the United States to remove all of its troops from the Arabian Peninsula. Not too long after his first fatwa, he issued a second one in 1998. In the second fatwa, he issued his problem with the American troop presence still in Saudi Arabia, even after the end of the Gulf War. And the American foreign policy with respect to the State of Israel. He also issued that jihad is a duty if the enemy is destroying Muslim countries. And to go further, he said that Muslims are obligated to attack American targets until the aggressive policy of the United States against Muslims is reversed. He argued that military strikes against American assets would send a message to the American people. This is an attempt to force the United States to reevaluate its support for Israel. The targets of the strikes were symbols of America's economic and military power. A year later, in November 2002, in bin Laden's letter to the American people, he stated Al-Qaeda's motives for the attack, some of which included U.S. support for Israel, the presence of U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia, the United States supporting Russian atrocities against Muslims in Chechnya, U.S. support for the Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon, and sanctions against Iraq. These are just some of the few things that were mentioned. When it came to planning, documents were seized during the 2011 operation that killed bin Laden. They found a few notes handwritten by bin Laden in September of 2002, with the heading of the birth of the idea of September 11th. In those notes, he says that Egyptian Air Flight 990 on October 31st, 1999 inspired him. He even says, in quote, "This is how the idea of 9/11 was conceived and developed in my head, and that is when we began planning it." But this was an interesting time because Al-Qaeda and bin Laden himself were in a period of transition. After bin Laden's infamous 1998 fatwa and the 1998 African embassy bombings, Osama bin Laden became 100% intent on attacking the United States of America. Early on Tuesday morning, September 11th, 2001, 19 hijackers took control of 4 commercial airlines. They picked large planes with long flights because they knew it would have more fuel. One of the hijackers, Mohammed Atta, said to hijack Boeing aircraft based on his understanding of the autopilot's feature. Speaking of Mohammed Atta, did you know his last meal was a vegetarian pizza? Fun fact. Anyway, at 7:59 a.m., Flight 11 took off from Boston. After about 15 minutes, 5 hijackers armed with box cutters took over the plane, injuring at least 3 people. It's also very well possible they could have killed one. Before taking over the cockpit, the terrorists displayed explosives and sprayed mace into the cabin. This was most likely to subdue any form of resistance. Then, Flight 175 takes off at 8:14 a.m. from Boston. This is also said to be the very same time Flight 11 was hijacked. Next, Flight 77 leaves the runway at 8:20 a.m. in Virginia. Flight 175, the hijackers kill both pilots, stab some crew members, and take full control of the plane. Like Flight 11, they use threats to subdue any form of opposition. Then Flight 93 departs from New Jersey. Flight 93 was running 42 minutes late. The first impact happened at 8:46 a.m. from Flight 11. The flight was deliberately crashed into the north face of the World Trade Center. Then at 8:51, Flight 77 was taken over. 17 minutes after the first impact, Flight 175 flew into the South Tower. This occurred at 9:03 a.m. After seeing the second flight hit the tower, it was no longer seen as an accident. Rather, it was seen as a terrorist attack. Flight 93 was then hijacked. After waiting 46 minutes, they took control of the plane at 9:28 a.m. 9 minutes after taking control of Flight 93, Flight 77 crashed into the west side of the Pentagon. Flight passengers and crew of Flight 93 were now aware of the situation unfolding from phone calls from the ground. This was dangerous and they knew their fate was death. As a result of this, uprisings happened at 9:57 a.m. The hijackers feared a successful uprising and decided to bring the plane down. Then they nosedived the plane into the ground, which ended up crashing in Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. It's believed that if the hijacked plane had gotten its way, it would have either hit the Capitol building or the White House. The crash at Shanksville effectively ended the 9/11 attacks. "9/11 caused many problems. It caused many health complications for many that were at the Ground Zero sites. Discrimination against Arab Americans went up at an all-time high. It even stains their identity to this day. Air quality around 9/11 didn't return to normal all the way until June of 2002. And most importantly, over 2,000 people lost their lives in these attacks. May God allow them to all rest in peace. In the end, 9/11 will be a very, very, very memorable day. Not just for the United States of America, but for the whole world. If you liked today's video, please like and subscribe. I post content just like this video and will continue to in the future. Hope you enjoyed. God bless.